Coming up on this edition of Pinpoint Weather University, we've got a special guest on the show today. Philip Jackson with the North Carolina Forest Service is joining me on the episode. We're talking about how the burn ban was lifted for 81 counties, but why 19 counties still are under the wildfire restrictions. We'll detail what's different in those counties versus the others. Plus, the drought continues to worsen here in the Carolinas. Now, pretty much all of the Queen City News viewing area is under extreme drought conditions, and even exceptional drought conditions are popping up. Why this latest drought monitor has now entered historic territory. You're watching Pinpoint Weather University, and this latest episode, it starts right now, my friends. Welcome into Pinpoint Weather University. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson here at Queen City News Plus. Big welcome to our YouTube viewers too. And if you're following me on IG at WXBrandon9 or following us at Fox 46 Charlotte, our Queen City News Instagram page, thanks so much for all the support. And if you have any suggestions for the show here at Pinpoint Weather University, as always, send those our way. You can also connect with me on Facebook at my meteorologist Brandon Lawson Facebook page or over on X at WXBrandon9. I always love receiving your comments and some of the suggestions you guys have for the show, and I'm trying to incorporate those as much as I can. So I do appreciate the love and support there, and we'll continue to grind on. And we're going to be talking about the drought again. I know the drought has been a big topic here lately, and it's been more of a bigger topic over the last few weeks now that water restrictions have been put in play. I feel like a lot of folks have really started to pay more attention to it now that's impacting everybody. But something else that we've been monitoring over the last several months really has been the wildfire threat. That is a threat that has been there for quite some time with this drought. And I know not everybody burns, not everybody has a fireplace or a fire pit in their backyard or their front yard or whatever, but a lot of people here in the Carolinas do. In North Carolina, due to some of the recent rains that we've had, that has actually helped us out a little bit when it comes to the wildfire threat. So the recent rains aren't necessarily getting us out of the drought, but they are bringing us some temporary relief in some areas. The wildfire threat has been lowered for some. It has washed away some of the pollen as well, which I know a lot of folks are really excited about. And it's also at least slowed down some of the worsening drought. It kept the drought from getting much worse than what it could have been last Thursday with some of the recent rain. So that's how the recent rain has helped. And again, highlighting that, the wildfire threat being lowered. And actually joining me on the show today is Philip Jackson with the North Carolina Forest Service, the Public Information Officer. Philip, I like to call you the voice sometimes of the NC Forest Service because I've texted you, I feel like, a couple of times a week over the last few months, just because wildfire season has been so active and the drought has been a big reason for that. Just talk about this wildfire season so far and just the activity you guys have seen.
Yeah, so going back to early March when we first started creeping up into wildfire season, our activity was pretty much statewide, balanced out from the mountains all the way to eastern North Carolina along the coastline, which is ultimately one of the reasons that we decided to implement a burn ban is our fire activity had just gotten to a point where it was almost too widespread and too frequent. And we needed to do whatever we could to slow down those new wildfire starts. And a burn ban is a method in which we can do that once we reach a point where our forest fire conditions have reached a hazardous level.
And then what are some of those ingredients that you guys use to issue the burn bans? What are some of the indicators that you have in place to help you guys make that call? Oh, we need a burn ban for the state.
Yeah, so the main trigger, if you will, would be once our forest fire conditions reach a hazardous level. And what are the contributing factors to that is going to be consistent low humidity, windy days. Obviously, prolonged drought was a factor as well. Spring wildfire season, March through May, is typical this in our state anyway, simply because of the green up process with the vegetation as we work towards the summer months. And when you don't have rain to offset the greening up process, if you will, where more moisture and nutrients is required for the green up process, then you can dry out rather quickly. And of course, North Carolina, you go back to September, October of 2025, which is when those rainfall deficits began to build. And so when we got to the later stages of March, we looked at our wildfire activity, how fast those fires, not only how quickly they were igniting, how easily they were igniting, but then how fast they were spreading once they were igniting. Ultimately, the rate of spread of some of these fires was outpacing our containment efforts and our ability to control these wildfires. So when you look at the long range forecast and you don't see any relief in sight in the form of rainfall or high humidity, you're already dealing with widespread fire activity. The wildfire behavior is acting a little erratic, and then you have to consider resource availability and where you are in terms of stretching resources too thin. And so all of those factors were at play late March when we decided to implement the burn ban.
And I was gonna mention, we've got a lot of video from Georgia. They have been dealing with very significant wildfires there, especially over the last week or so. And they've also been experiencing the drought conditions. Was this a concern for you guys as well when it came down to issuing the burn ban? Were you guys worried about the potential for massive wildfires, or was it more of just like a smaller wildfire threat?
Yeah, I mean, the potential was certainly there. You saw several wildfires in South Carolina as well. South Carolina has implemented, lifted, and re-implemented burn bans throughout the spring, in the duration in which ours was in effect. And so, really, the wildfire activity and potential, the risk, was pretty much across the southeast due to the factor of drought and some of these other conditions that we've discussed. And so, again, when we were dealing with these situations in late March, we looked at the long range forecast and do we see any relief in sight over the next couple of weeks? And the answer at that time was no. There was not a whole lot of rain forecast, if any. Temperatures were going to fluctuate between 90 and 50, and with that, you get the frontal systems with wind. And so you pretty much saw textbook fire weather that time of year back in March. And then one extra element that some of your viewers can take to heart is the Hurricane Helene impacts
Yeah.
that still remain in Western North Carolina. Of course, if a fire were to ignite in some of these areas in Western North Carolina where the Helene blowdown and the timber damage is still substantial, well, then a fire can spread quickly, become difficult to contain, and that's going to be a threat moving forward for the next 10, 15, if not 20 years. And
And I
so
and I was
that,
actually
of
gonna
course, is
ask
another.
that. I was actually gonna
Sure.
ask that. Why is that threat just going for so long? We'll get. I know you guys have actually lead the burn ban for some kinds. We'll get that here just momentarily. But the Helene vegetation down threat is going to be around for years, possibly over decades. Why is that? Why does that threat linger for so long?
Yeah, so in terms of volume, roughly 822,000 acres across Western North Carolina experienced some form of timber damage. And some of that's partial, but a lot of that's actually still physically on the ground that are, in some cases, entire mountainsides that still have the entire blowdown present. And so cleanup efforts are going to be slow moving simply because of the magnitude of the timber damage. And so as the timber continues to lay on the ground year in and year out, it's going to further dry out. It's going to die. Most of it is dead, or if not dying, and it's going to become more available. And so each year that we get further removed from Hurricane Helene, and that timber is still on the ground, it's going to be more flammable next year than it is this year, and so on and so forth until it's gradually removed through prescribed burning efforts, if and where that's possible. That might not always be practical, and then just the gradual cleanup efforts over time. And so each year that we're removed from Hurricane Helene, that timber is going to be more kindling for fires to spread.
Definitely something to watch for years to come for sure. And you guys actually over this past weekend have actually relieved the burn ban, released the burn ban for 81 counties in North Carolina. So that means 19 counties are still under the burn ban. This was the map you guys released on your Facebook page. So the burn ban still continues for Gaston, Mecklenburg County, Union, Cabarrus, Iredell, up into Rowan, Stanley, and Anson County. That is the Queen City News viewing area, but also, Rockingham, Stokes, as you're getting up towards Guilford County, Randolph, and a few others more as well included in there. Some counties up towards District 11. So why is that area still under the burn ban, but counties around it, the burn ban has been released?
Yeah, so again, going back to those previous conditions and factors that we were talking about just a few minutes ago, over the course of the last couple of weeks, we begin to see temperature somewhat moderate, but we're also seeing higher humidity levels. And so when you go back to March 28th, when the humidity was in the 20 and 30 percentile, even down to the teens in some cases, is now in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s, if not higher. And so the higher humidity days, even though it's not rainfall, so it's not going to do much for your drought, it indicates that the air is more saturated and therefore there's a little bit more moisture available that wasn't there before. The overnight recovery, as we call it, when you start waking up in the morning and you find dew on the ground, the grass is wet. So again, those things they don't do anything for the drought, frankly, but they do help us in terms of reducing wildfire risk. Also, going back to late March, we would look at the forecast and you wouldn't see rain for 2 or 3 weeks. Whereas now you're starting to see the potential for unsettled weather at least every 3 or 4 days. And so the map that you're showing right there indicates last week's rainfall totals. And as you can see, the area basically missed out. The area that remains under the burn ban, those 19 counties, unfortunately just flat out missed that rainfall from last week and especially on Saturday. And so when you look at the other accumulations being somewhere between nearly an inch to almost 2 inches in some areas, those are the areas that we felt confident that with that rainfall, as well as some of the higher humidity levels, full green up is another thing. Now that we're in later stages of spring, the vegetation, your trees, we've almost reached full green up, if not complete full green up in some areas. And what that does, again, doesn't do anything for the drought, but it is a reduced wildfire risk simply because the vegetation is a little more fire resistant than it was back in March. It's no such thing as fireproof. And so it's definitely green up doesn't mean that we can't have fires. It just means that things tend to be a little bit more fire resistant. So between the higher humidity levels, the full green up that we've seen, additional moisture and a recovery overnight, as well as the recent rainfall statewide over the last 7 days, going back to last week. Those were all the factors that ultimately put us in a position where the forest fire conditions are no longer hazardous. Therefore, we felt comfortable lifting the burn ban for those 81 counties. But as that map illustrates right there, those 19 counties, unfortunately, when Saturday's rain event moved through, it just flat out missed them.
My next question, it kind of leads into the upcoming rainfall that we have for later this week. I mean, models are still a little spread, but there are some indications that we could see over an inch of rain in the Piedmont of North Carolina for the first time since mid-February. If that rain was to happen for later this week, could that burn ban then be lifted for the rest of our counties here in North Carolina?
That's certainly what we're hoping for. We're hoping that that rain produces on forecast. If not, maybe gives us a little bit more. It's certainly a welcome sight. And so we will certainly reevaluate and see what rain actually falls and hits the ground and is able to be absorbed. And so we are looking at that now, and we will continue to look at that through the week. And as that rainfall physically hits the ground, and we'll reevaluate. Our hope is that it will be enough for us to remove the burn ban entirely. We're not quite there yet, simply because a forecast is a forecast. So we need to see what actually falls. But those are the intentions. Burn bans are not ideal really for anyone, us included. The same resources with the North Carolina Forest Service, who are responsible for responding to thousands of wildfires across the state every single year, they're also tasked with enforcing the burn ban and extinguishing and writing citations for these illegal fires. So when we have a burn ban in place, it is just another element of responsibility for our initial attack resources that they have to deal with. And so burn bans are not ideal really for anybody, us included. And so the objective is not to hold it in place for as long as possible, to keep it in place for as long as possible. It's until we're no longer seeing hazardous forest fire conditions. That's what's outlined for us in North Carolina General Statute. And so hopefully we'll get the rain this week. That's forecast, and hopefully that will put us in a position for those 19 counties where those hazardous conditions are no longer present, and hopefully we can get back to fully lifting this ban.
And Philip, I do have one more question for you. We're going to take just a quick commercial break, but after the break, I just want to ask you more about what the threat could look like going forward if the drought continues. Details on that coming up next here on Pinpoint Weather Universe. Welcome back into Pinpoint Weather University. Got my good friend Philip Jackson with me with the North Carolina Forest Service. And Phil, you were talking earlier about how things are greening up. It doesn't completely eliminate the wildfire threat, but it definitely can lower it a good bit. And as we get more towards summer, I actually am seeing grass grow quite a bit. People are starting to mow their grass, and trees continue to green up. So even if the drought were to continue into the summer with extreme drought conditions and even the potential for exceptional drought conditions, would the threat for wildfires still lower due to that green up?
So as we move into the summer and we move out of spring wildfire season, we typically see our wildfire risk reduced because of that green up, but also because of the humidity that the South in general just experiences every year, where we're looking at 80, 90, 100 percentile with the humidity levels. And the South is hot and humid, and so it might be unpleasant to deal with outside, but it does help with our wildfire risk. With that being said, if this drought does continue, and we were to find ourselves in a patch of a 2 or 3 week span during the summertime where the temperatures are 90s, 100 plus without any rainfall, then we could very well start seeing extreme wildfire risk again, especially we have summertime thunderstorms become more common throughout June, July, and August, even into September. And so that's when we tend to see some of our lightning wildfires caused by lightning. It's not super common. We do have them. They only account for about 1% of our fires across the state, but that 1% typically is most prevalent during those summer months where we're seeing more thunderstorms. And so ultimately, the message is going to remain the same year in, year out when it comes to prevention, is that most of these fires that we have, they are human caused, which means they are avoidable. And so the main culprit of that, of course, is unfortunately debris burning, where folks are just out burning yard debris in their yards. Most counties allow that. It is a legal practice, but you need to make sure that you're doing it on the right day and under the right weather conditions. And one of the biggest issues that we have is folks just not staying with their fire. They will light a debris pile on fire, and then they will walk away and they will continue to do other chores around the house. They will run errands. And when that fire is left under unattended, it's going to do what it's going to do, and the weather's going to have a huge impact on that. So ultimately, even if we do find ourselves here the next few days where the burn ban has been lifted for all 100 counties, we are at full green up. We see some unsettled weather. If we get into the summer where the temperatures are high, and the moisture and the rainfall is just low and this drought continues, then we could very well be in a position where we start seeing widespread wildfire activity again. So folks need to be extremely careful. And even as you and I talk right now, even though the burn ban has been lifted for 81 counties, right now we are still in spring wildfire season. So folks need to be extremely cautious in those areas where the ban has been lifted.
All right, Philip Jackson with the North Carolina Forest Service. Thank you so much. And May 4th was International Firefighters Day. So big shout out to all you guys at the Forest Service, all the fire crews that have been working tirelessly over the last few months to put out wildfires and to keep wildfire awareness in our heads as we navigate this drought, and with the wildfire threat being a little bit more higher than usual this year due to the drier conditions that we've been seeing. So, Phil, thank you so much. Always love having you on the show here on Pinpoint Weather University here on Queen City News Plus, and I appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks, Brandon. We appreciate all that you do.
All right, thank you, Phil. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about April. April is over and May is now here, but April was creating some history here in Charlotte. We detailing for you just how hot it was, and other dry month too, just how dry April was here in Charlotte. Coming up for you on the other side of the break. Welcome back into Pinpoint Weather University. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson. We just spoke with Philip Jackson with the North Carolina Forest Service. He's public information officer there. Gave us a lot of good information on the wildfire threat we've been experiencing over the last few months, during the spring months in particular, and the drought conditions. Just how greening up might help us out a little bit in the summer, but still, if the drought continues to be as significant as it is, burning still could be an issue coming up this summer. So something we'll have to pay attention to. I enjoy talking to Philip, and hopefully the rain that we're getting from later this week of May 3rd, hopefully later this week we'll be able to see that burn ban lifted for all of our counties here in North Carolina. The Tar Heel State could use it, and we were talking a little bit offline about, the state parks, how you can't really have your campfires at the state park, can't go camping really and enjoy it and grill and stuff on some of the grills they have there in some of the areas where the burn ban is still in effect. So fingers crossed we can get some good rain in here and hopefully at least limit the wildfire threat, but we'll need a lot more rain to get rid of the drought. We need like 2 or 3 inches a week to really help us out, and it's got to be more on a consistent basis. But it looks like we'll get into more of a wetter pattern here starting this week. I do want to talk about April. I know April's kind of long gone now, but there's still some things I didn't get a chance to highlight, and it has to do with our temperatures and precipitation for the month of April. So April in Charlotte was actually the second warmest April we've ever experienced here in the Queen City. We had 2 record highs this month, and we started April off on a bang, right? April 1st, 86 degrees, new record high on April 1st, and then we get into April 15th, just 2 weeks later, and we see another record high of 89 degrees. We got our first 90-degree day of the year this April on April 18th, which is about about a month or so before we tend to see our first 90-degree day. Our average first 90-degree day, I believe, is around May 20th. We saw it on April 18th this year. So yeah, second warmest April on record for Charlotte. It was a very warm month, and you look at all the orange days there. All the days in orange are days where we were above average. So I mean, we look at it, including the red days there. So you've got 86 degrees on April 1st, 89 on April 15th. So if you include those two in there and just kind of count it up, doing a little bit of math for you here offhand, we're talking about 6 plus 7, 13, 17. So it looks like about 18 days of the 30 days of April were above average. That's significant. That is a very significant April here in Charlotte. That's why it's the second warmest on record. And then you look at some of the blue days, which obviously there's a lot less of those. Those are days where we were below average, and we didn't see that quite often. We did get a little bit of a cool down for the second week of April. I should say, the first full week of April, but unfortunately, that wasn't enough to cool us down for the rest of the month. We went on a heater ever after that. So I do want to talk about rainfall too. Rainfall has been the big story here lately, right? We need it, and we don't have it. And when you look at April and look at the rainfall totals here, bringing you full screen, it was the 5th driest April on record for the Queen City. We had 4 days of measurable rain, if you will. So March, we only had 2 days of measurable rain, might have been 3, but this month we get 4 days of measurable rain. Unfortunately, none of these days got us over 4/10 of an inch of rain. The rainiest day was April 5th, and we only saw 3/10 of an inch of rain that day. April 28th, we saw some recent rains here where we got about 2/10 of an inch of rain. And then April 30th, yeah, 1/100th of an inch. That's not going to get you out of a drought. 8/100th of an inch on April 25th. So we need to get a little bit more aggressive with rainfall totals. We obviously don't want to get so aggressive to where we're flooding out, but we need to do a little bit better than this. But it was the 5th driest April on record for Charlotte. And guess what? March was the 8th driest March on record for Charlotte. So we're continuing to stack on these dry historic months, and we're continuing to add to this historic drought that we're in. So we'll get the latest update on Thursday, March 7th, for the United States Geological Survey. This was the update last week. Obviously, we've got extreme and exceptional drought conditions popping up over the Carolinas. Those exceptional drought conditions that you see there, that little darker shade over Monroe County, Union County, but over Monroe, and even parts of Cabarrus County, Stanley, and eastern Mecklenburg County. That's the first time we've seen exceptional drought conditions since March 2008. So we obviously are now in more of a historic territory when it comes to this drought. Just a matter of how long the recovery is going to be now. In 2007, 2008, we got exceptional drought conditions, I believe, in December of 2007. We did not get out of those exceptional drought conditions until March 2008. So it took about 3 months to get rid of all the exceptional drought conditions. And then it took about another 6 months leading in towards like September, October to get rid of the drought completely to recover. So it takes months to get out of this. It takes a little bit to get into drought. It takes a lot to get out of it. So definitely something we'll have to continue to work to do over the next several months. I am meteorologist Brandon Lawson. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Again, a big shout out to North Carolina Forest Service, Philip Jackson, for coming on the show with us today, breaking down the wildfire threat, what goes into why those burn bans are issued, and what goes into getting rid of some of the burn bans as we get some rain around here, as the green up continues, more as we get into the summer months here. Again, I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson. As we end the show, I always like to say, take care of yourself and each other as we navigate this earth together. Also, as we navigate the drought together, I know it's frustrating saving water. I know it's annoying. I know it's not fun to do. Nobody wants to be told how much water. Nobody really wants to be told anything in life anymore when it comes down to what to do. But please follow some of these water restrictions that are in place. They're for everybody. It's to help everybody out. And again, if it's, using the dishwasher when it's actually full, or watering your lawn less, or washing your car a little less, go to a car wash place where they use recycled water. And I know it costs a little bit of money, but again, it's going to help us out a little bit when it comes down to getting out of this drought. Just some ways to help out. And again, let's work together to do this, as we always do here in the Carolinas. I'm meteorologist Brandon Lawson. We'll see you next time on the new edition of Pinpoint Weather University.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.